My guest today on Salon Radio is Gadeir Abbas, who is with the Council on American Islamic Relations, and he is also the attorney representing Gulet Mohamed, the 18-year-old Somali-born American citizen whom I interviewed last week from a detention facility in Kuwait where he had just spent a week, and he described how he had been essentially abducted, taken to an unknown place, interrogated, beaten severely, and tortured for reasons that he did not know and could not figure. Gadeir, thanks very much for joining me. And let me begin just by asking you, I think I interviewed Gulet, talked to him on the telephone sometime last week, late last week, and at the time he was in this detention facility in Kuwait, told that he would be deported back to the United States, but he didn't know when that would happen, how it would happen, or much of anything else. Can you give us the update about what you've been able to learn about his current status and where things stand?
Yeah, sure, Glenn, and thanks for having me. What we've been able to learn is so far the U.S. government has not provided any meaningful consulate services as they do typically of United States citizens. We've been able to learn that that Gulet Mohamed is now on a no-fly list. We've also, according to a conversation that Gulet's uncle has had with the Kuwaiti deportation facility officials, that those officials have indicated that they want to deport Gulet back to the United States, and the reason that they're not allowed to is because of the United States placing him on a no-fly list, and even going so far as to indicate that the reason he's there in the first place is because because the United States government wants him there. What was most striking to us has been it was after so he was paid one visit by 3 FBI agents soon after he was placed in the deportation facility. So Gulet Mohamed on December 20th spent over a week, about 8 days in an undisclosed location, blindfolded and tortured, and then he ended up in a deportation facility. And then he was subsequently visited the next day by 3 FBI agents. Yesterday, an embassy official came to visit Gulet Mohamed, and instead of providing direct assistance to the very discrete problems that we know are preventing him from leaving Kuwait, the embassy official told Gulet Mohamed that to expect a visit from 2 more FBI agents tomorrow that will question him about his travels to Somalia and Yemen. Now, this is a 19-year-old teenager that's a United States citizen his own government, instead of expeditiously working on his behalf to ensure that he's released back to the United States, is engaged in these antics where they're simply interrogating him on the flimsiest of suspicions.
Now, you had written a letter which I think you sent on the day that I had interviewed Gulet, essentially asking several different agencies of the Obama administration, including the Justice Department, to provide a whole set of information that you had requested about whether the U.S. was knowledgeable about this detention, whether they played a role in it, whether they also for assistance in helping you to get your client out of detention where he's being held despite being charged with no crime of any kind. Have you heard back from them in any way? Have you had any success in communicating with any of the agencies of the U.S. government about this case?
So the most substantive response that we've been able to get has been from the Justice Department, which has just paid us, the professional courtesy of forwarding our information to the criminal section of the DOJ and indicating that if they felt it necessary to take action, that they would, but no action that we're aware of has actually taken place. The one excuse that the State Department is now using about why they cannot talk openly and discuss the services that they're not actually providing Gulet is because we haven't been able to get from Gulet a signed Privacy Act waiver that would authorize the State Department to talk openly about his case. We've liaisoned in terms of of explaining that the reason we haven't been able to get such a form signed by Gulet is because he is in a deportation facility in Kuwait, and Kuwaiti officials are not allowing us to access him and have a signed statement from him. So I mean, I think this is just another element of evasion that we're seeing from the U.S. government. On one hand, the United States government, the State Department is saying that they're firmly committed to upholding the privacy concerns of Gulet Mohamed, and on the other hand, they're engaged in placing huge obstacles for him to come back to the United States. So we really question the genuineness of their efforts.
Well, let me ask you about the issue of being on the no-fly list, which at least ostensibly is what's keeping him in this deportation center for the moment. A couple of questions about that. One of the things that people raised when I wrote about it the first time was, well, and in one sense, being put on the no-fly list is a form of involuntary exile, because if you're outside the United States, when it happens, you can't get back into the country unless, suggested some people, you, for example, arrange to return by boat or some alternative means. I guess, given that he's in Kuwait, ship would be the only option. Is that actually a possibility, a viable possibility for getting him out of deportation and getting him back into the United States? And then the other question is, I know that in the past when people have been on the no-fly list and not able to get back and the ACLU sued, they essentially capitulated quickly. And for example, one of the things they'll do is have marshals accompany the person back on the plane. Are either of those options things that you're exploring? Are either of them viable at this point?
Yeah, so we are exploring legal options and preparing legal action if nothing changes over the next few days. It's a pretty safe bet that we'll be taking legal action. And the placement on the no-fly list of U.S. citizens abroad, it's really the most fundamental deprivation, constitutional deprivation there is, because a fundamental prerequisite to exercising any of your constitutional liberties is being in the United States, and this is an example of a deprivation that's so basic. There really aren't many cases that actually deal with it, because it's taken for granted that you have a fundamental right to re-enter the United States. Now the idea that he would be able to come to the United States by boat would is untenable in the sense that the legal analysis itself is when the United States places a undue burden on a fundamental right, that itself is unconstitutional. So asking him to take a tugboat from Kuwait to the United States would be unduly burdensome on a fundamental right. And in this case especially, that's not an option, because he's in a deportation facility, and that's not how Kuwait deports the people that they've designated for deportation. They do it by plane. So we've pursued publicly as well as behind closed doors avenues with the federal government, and haven't gotten very far. So I think that the preparation for legal action is coming.
Have you been able to obtain any information at all about what the basis was for either placing him on the no-fly list or for his being detained and interrogated in this way? I mean, obviously he was aware of the fact that they seem interested in his travels to Yemen and to Somalia, but it can't possibly be the case that simply visiting those two countries for an American Muslim is enough to get you on a no-fly list and detained and beaten in Kuwait. I don't mean to deny the possibility that that's the case, but just the justification. Have you had any success in learning anything more about what the claims are against him that have resulted in these punishments?
No, the basis for our understanding of the suspicion that they have against Gulet is really based on the types of questions that were asked of him during his week-long interrogation, as well as the types of questions that the FBI wanted to ask him, but he didn't allow to be asked during his custody at the deportation facility. And it really is. So whenever we get a case like this, or any case where the FBI is approaching someone seeking information, we always, at CARE ask, why is this person come under suspicion by the FBI? And in this case, once we found out that he traveled to Somalia and Yemen, the conversation essentially stops there, because in our experience, it seems to be that if you can even identify the locations of Somalia and Yemen on a map, that is grounds for suspicion. So I think when you see, for instance, like the Dana Priest piece about like Top Secret America, when you create a gigantic law enforcement infrastructure and dedicate large segments of it to prosecuting and pursuing terrorism leads, fortunately in this country, we don't actually have a lot of terrorism. That's, fortunately. But you have a lot of people that have careers and are working 40 hours a week, and their job is to find terrorism, leads. So you get situations where, they're printing people's Facebook pages off. The FBI prints people's Facebook pages off where there's an off-color comment coming from, a teenager, and then that becomes the basis for seeking information and it's on. We've been astonished by the flimsiest of pretexts have been used to launch ill-conceived investigation. So when we saw that Gulet had been to Yemen and Somalia, we understood that's probably where the suspicion came from.
Right, which of course turns large groups of people in the United States into basically inherently suspicious citizens. Because if you are Somalian born, or your family is Somalian as his is, then it's quite natural that you would visit Somalia. There are schools in Yemen and the like that lots of people would have reason to go to. And so, as you say, it's worse than flimsy, actually, a way of turning large groups of people into suspects without their having done anything wrong. Let me ask you this last question. I know when I spoke to Gulet, and anyone who listened to the interview could hear this, he was, emotionally distressed in the extreme. He was often difficult. He was tripping over his words. It was often difficult to hear him speak. He was crying and breaking into tears and emotional outbursts quite a bit. Do you have any more information about his current state of mind, given what he's been through and the fact that he's basically in this indefinite black hole? And also talk about a little bit about his family. Did they know where he was for this week, and are they able to communicate with him now, and where are they, and are they helping out?
Yeah, so Gulet, it's day to day. Today he was absolutely in positive spirits. I think he's been given hope by the salvo of publicity that his case got in the last week. He's seeing his brother from Virginia has flown to Kuwait, and he's been able to see his uncle and his brother on one occasion. It seems as if Kuwaiti officials are also doing much more on his behalf than the American government. So he's heartened by that as well. I think the most difficult thing that when I've spoken with him is he asks, how long am I going to be here? When is this going to? When do you think I can leave? And I don't want to. It's tough because in past cases, situations like this have dragged on for months sometimes, and the results for the person that returns to the United States have not always been positive. So it's a tough situation, and as a 19-year-old kid, I think Gulet is handling it better than most of us would. His family, of course, is struggling, but I think they're very focused on doing what they can to bring him back, and you can see that they're relying on each other to do that. But what I think the most frightening thing is that his family didn't know where he was from December 20th to December 28th. they would still not know where he was if it wasn't for some prisoner that happened to have a surreptitiously kept cell phone and let Gulet use it. So without that, I think without that connection to the outside world, I think his family would be doing a lot worse.
Well, Gadeir, I really appreciate taking the time to talk to me about this, and I definitely intend to keep following this case. It's an extremely important one, and he's far from the only person who's been subjected to this treatment. So how this plays out, I think, is really important. And thanks for your work on this, and thanks for talking to me about it.
I appreciate it, Glenn.
Bye-bye.